You're listening to JACKmix, our Artist Talk series. I'm Amen Igbinosun, Executive Director at JACK. Here, we slow down. We listen to the artists who move through our space, to the neighbors who remind us why we make. Each voice you hear is shaping what's next on our stage and in our world. So, settle in. Let's begin. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Artist Talks. I am here with a special guest. We are here with the founder of JACK, who also was the executive director, the artistic director, the development director, the managing director, the custodial director, pretty much the person who ran and really incubated JACK to be where it is today. The one, the only, Alec Duffy. Welcome.
Thank
Alec.
you so much for having me.
Thank you
Glad
so
to be
much for
here.
being here. So I just want to, start off with, who are you? Where are you from? Who's your peoples? Talk to us about
Yes. So I grew up in Massachusetts, and genetically, I come from a line of ministers, actually. So both of my grandparents, both of my grandfathers on either side were ministers. My uncle, my great uncle, and so I grew up somewhat in the church in a way. I was singing in the choir, church choir, when I was by fourth grade. My parents weren't ministers, but my mom was a political organizer. She was gathering people in our community around issues that were important to her. And that force of gathering was something that kind of I felt I inherited, or discovered later on that I had kind of inherited. But I grew up seeing a lot of theater and fell in love with it. My parents would take me to the community theater in town. I remember the first show that I saw was The Fantastics, and just fell in love with the darkness, and the light on stage, and these people acting very strange, but it was a peculiar experience that I just felt so drawn to. I love this mystery, this ritual, even though I wasn't sure what was going on. The music, I just remember just loving the music, the fact that these people were singing in harmony together, and it felt akin to church in a way. But in an even more mysterious way. And so I grew up in Massachusetts, attracted to theater, started acting on stage by fifth grade.
Oh, you were an actor.
In the community youth community theater, run by Kathy Alexander, who's still with us, and found myself way over my head in terms of memorizing lines as a fifth grader. But I was drawn to it. I caught the bug. And so I just continued along that path, drawn to theater, doing whatever, the most I could do in terms of acting, throughout high school, into college. I thought that was going to be my path, the path of an actor. And I was at Duke University and took a directing class with a professor named Jeff Storer, who's still teaching at Duke University. And he taught me that I could lead and gather people in the realm of theater, which I had not considered. So all these things that my relatives were doing in church, I could do in this field that I was in love with. And took a swerving turn basically in college, from imagining that I was going to try to get into a grad school as an actor, into wanting to explore what directing is, what is shaping an experience for other people like, and what are the tools that I need in order to do that. I had a very formative experience in Berlin. I did a study abroad program there and experienced the theater there, which was so radical and so bold and experimental to me. I hadn't really experienced work that was unusual most of my experiences in theater in the States were very like, you'll see a play and you kind of get a sense for what's going to happen by the end, right? You kind of, once it starts, you're like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
Let's sit in. I know what's going to happen. I know these two are going to get together, or these people are going to have a big fight but then get together again at the end, or this family is going to, hidden mysteries are going to be unveiled and then reconciled by the end. Those were a lot of the plays that I was seeing. When I went to Germany, you just never knew what was going to happen next when you were in the theater.
Yeah.
And it was truly kind of a director's theater, and they allowed directors to really take risks. And so there were directors like Frank Kastorf and Christoph Marthaler, whose work I was really, really into. And I came back to the States on fire, really wanting to just get put together an ensemble and get to work. So that's a little bit of my trajectory from the beginning to that stage. But yeah, truly, I was thankful to my parents for exposing me to the arts and to theater, bringing me to concerts and whatnot. That was such a strong part of growing up and who I was.
Oh, that's beautiful, Alec. And you touched on this a little bit, and I was hoping that we could expand on it a little bit more. But what is your artistic lineage, right? Who are some of the people, the artists, or it doesn't necessarily have to be artists, but who are the people who inspired you, whether it be your style, whether it be just inspired you in terms of like you were moved by their work? But what are some of these artists, these people, these leaders that kind of inspire you and the work that you do?
When I landed in New York, this was right around year 2000, I started seeing work by theater companies like Radio Hole and Collapsible Giraffe that were doing these like very, very unusual, fierce productions in like garages in New York City, storefronts, and there was a hardcore punk energy to their productions. Similar to the productions I saw in Germany, you really didn't know what was going to happen next, and you were kind of like gripping your seat because you weren't sure whether you were going to be called on as an audience member to be involved some way, or you were going to witness a fight break out between an actor and someone walking down the street who like looks in and like yells. It was a very attractive energy to me. The theater that I started making was not necessarily like that. It was work that in retrospect felt very unusual work, but rather soft, actually. The first piece that I kind of like that launched Hoi Polloi was a production called The Less We Talk, which was a piece about a choir. So we had 24 people on stage in a kind of like
big productions.
Yes, very drawn to large ensembles, even from the get. And they were kind of this endless rehearsal, like a no exit kind of situation as 24 members. And I'm very proud of that production. But it was not challenging in the same way that these productions that I was really excited by were. But yet they still lived within me. And I think over time, as our world started changing, as our society started changing, as America started changing over the last 20 years, the way I do work and the work that I create as a theater director has also changed. It has been impossible for the changes in our society to not be reflected in my work. So my work has gotten a lot more ugly, a lot more brutal, and in a way that I feel like reflects, especially now, our current moment of just like recognizing how screwed we are, in a way that maybe we didn't have a sense for 20 years ago. There was still there was a lot of hope, and that moved in our country, and that moved in me.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
More in terms of like how does that ugliness or reflections of the world that we live in today, how does that live in your work? I know most recently you did the play Family at La Mama Theater. But using that possibly as an example, how does that live? How do you breathe the pain that's happening in our society in your work as a director, a leader?
Yeah. You know, one artist that's really influenced me only in watching videos of their work is Reza Abdo.
Okay.
He's a theater maker from Iran originally, immigrant to New York and LA in maybe late 80s. Made these large ensemble pieces that were just screaming, basically. I speak metaphorically, screaming at the audience of the condition that Reza saw this country. And this is an artist who contracted AIDS, so very much influenced by his own experience as a gay man with AIDS in a country that would not accept that as a disease worth curing or worth solving, especially in the 80s under Reagan and Bush. And so he was putting his mind and his values on stage that and he felt like he was creating work that reflected that torment for himself. So with Family, that was another play that I read the script of, and I was like, holy crap, this is like, it's so intense and brutal and violent. And that felt perfectly aligned with the experience that a lot of us are going through right now of just feeling punched over and over, and trying to feel like how to be a victim, like how to be a good victim. And reconciling that we may never be, we may never move out of victimhood. Dealing with these issues on stage was important to me in this moment to grapple with, and almost as if like I think Celine says something like, Celine Song, the writer of Family, like we need theater to comfort those that need to be comforted and discomfort those who have comfort already. You know? Yeah. And I feel like this play, Family, and the other plays we've been doing are kind of doing that. For those who have, the reactions that I get from audience members are those who are like feeling this pain, feeling this hurt, are glad to see that reflected on stage, so that they're not seeing a glossed over vision of reality that they don't appreciate, that they don't experience in real life.
Let's go back a little bit. So you arrive in New York City around 2000, you said, right? And a little over a decade later, you and a collection of artists and friends decide to start Jack. How did that happen? What was the impetus behind the start of a space like Jack?
Yeah. Well, my wife and I met. My wife, Mimi Lien, she's a set designer. We met.
Tony Award winning set designer. I just want to throw that in there. Go ahead.
We met as grantees of Theater Communications Group, TCG. They select these direct and design fellows, or they did at the time, and we were these fellows. We were in this cohort of fellows, and we fell in love. And we were, like a year later, at the TCG conference in Baltimore, amidst other fellows, all of our age, so peers in our early 30s. And all we did all week with these peers was complain about the state of American theater. The theaters with resources weren't doing the right work, didn't have the right audiences, the right people on stage, etc.
Well, what do you mean by right work?
Yeah, right. I mean, whatever that meant for each of us, it was just a complaint fest.
Got it.
And at the end of it, I was thinking, wow, it's so strange. The theaters that we are complaining about are theaters that are now behemoths, right? The regional theaters and whatnot. But they started out in garages and storefronts 30 years ago, founded by people our age or younger. And I thought, where is the entrepreneurial impulse in our generation? Why does it feel like we're all beholden to the status quo?
Right.
Who's starting theaters these days? And a lot of it has to do with economic, difference in economy from that decade to this decade. But at the same time, I turned to Mimi and I was like, what if we started the theater that we're all talking about wanting to see? A theater that reflects the diversity of the surrounding community. A theater that is in conversation with that community, where people in the neighborhood feel at home and feel connected to the art. And so we decided to see what it would take to build that. And so I gathered a group of fellow artists that I've been working with for years, collaborators from all different backgrounds and perspectives, and was looking for like a space, looking for a garage, looking for a storefront to create our Steppenwolf, to create our Berkeley rep, whatever it was, and found this garage space in Clinton Hill that the rent was like $4,500 a month, and I did some like back of the napkin math, and that was pretty much the extent of it. No business plan. It was more like, I think if we had like ticket sales of this much, we'd be able to cover those costs. And signed a lease, a 7-year lease, and immediately like just started doing stuff in there. And we're recipients of the generosity of the theater community in a lot of ways. We inherited speakers from Frank Henschker at CUNY. We inherited lights from Soho Rep and a light board from Soho Rep because they were changing over their system. All sorts of stuff like that. And we had a bare bones, we had inherited risers from the Ohio Theater.
Oh, that's where they came from?
That's right, yes, they have a long history. And just started putting up shows and asking around who wants to do something here. And people just came out of the woodwork. And this is a time when 20 small theaters had closed in the previous 5 years in New York City. So artists were hungry for a space to present their work, uncensored. All limitations and no limitations, right? It was a space with nothing. We couldn't give them anything. There was no money. There was like 16 lighting instruments. We didn't have any staff to help them like program lights or anything. So they had to do it all basically, but there was no one telling them what to do or what not to do. And so we just started having performances, like 3-night runs, 1-night like readings and dance performances and whatnot. And it just all kind of developed from there.
How did you find these artists in the early stages of Jack? I know they came out of the woodwork, but how did you curate it? Because you founded theater, you led it, and then I need our audience to really understand like it was a one-man show for a little bit in the sense of like the actual operations of this space. How did you find this community? How did you gather these people?
Yeah, I want to give props to Stephen Lefew, who was my collaborator, co-founder, but he worked side by side with me for the first 2 years before moving to the West Coast at Jack. He was running the bar, the box office, helping me with move platforms, riser platforms, doing the lights, sound. So certainly I was not alone, and of course other people would come in and out and help out. But in terms of finding artists, word of mouth, really. And that was kind of enough. We would get, we put up a little website and then got some submissions through that, but people would actually just walk down the street, poke their head in, be like, what's going on here? Oh, really? I'm a dancer. Can I do something here? Sure.
They still do. I love it, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the value, I think, of the storefront. There's not having a storefront theater is very rare.
Yeah.
Where it's
in
just
New York
like
City.
Yes,
Yeah,
in New York City,
too,
right?
yeah.
Where you walk in and you're like almost on stage.
Yeah.
There are other theaters which have like lobbies and like security and like
Giant steps to enter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how we built. And certainly I was scouting. I was going to see a lot of stuff and talking to artists that I saw in readings or installation. One of the main forces of our programming back then was performance art. I was really inspired artistically by performance art back then, and we collaborated with a bunch of curators who were curating performance art here. That got increasingly, actually, I'm going to use the word dangerous, and so we ended up not like. It was the night that one of the performance artists pulled out 2 knives, jumped on a 60-year-old man in the audience.
Oh boy.
Broke their glasses, and then everyone fled as this was happening in the audience out the doors. That I was like, all right, I think that's the end of that chapter of our programming. But that was kind of the nature of a lot of the programming in the first couple of years. Were huge experiments, things that I would not see until an audience was there. Like there weren't rehearsals, or there were just people coming in and doing one night only things, and it was exciting, and it was an exciting time. But like we kind of, I'd say, matured a bit since then to more theater runs or dance runs or whatnot. Yeah.
Okay. In those early days, like what was a choice or risk that has now defined the DNA of Jack? Like what was a decision that was made that you weren't sure about, or that you knew were a risk that is now a part of Jack's DNA?
Yeah, so in around 2014, 2015, Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, and protests rose up, in Ferguson, but also in New York City around that time. This is around also the time when Trayvon Martin was killed, and of course others. And as the protests were teeming in New York City, I was thinking, how can we support or be a part of this movement, this protest movement, like right now, like today or tomorrow or the next day? I was like, we don't have a lot of people a part of Jack, in terms of, we don't have any staff really. We don't have money, but we have space. And so then came the brainstorming session of, well, how can we as a space be of service right now? And out of that I conceived of this 6-month-long series called Forward Ferguson, which was a series of community conversations on police violence, commissioned performances by theater artists, by dance artists around the topic of racial justice, and workshops in de-escalation practices, techniques, and that series really took off. Like we started getting people through our doors who had never been to a performance before, but were interested in having that kind of conversation, because there was no one else, at least in this neighborhood, having those community conversations where people could come together of all races and backgrounds and perspectives, and share their perspectives. And it would get heated and hot, but it was the only place where that was happening in our neighborhood. And so it became clear that this was clearly a niche that we could fill with our space, a service we could provide. And in thinking about how to double down on that, after that series was over, I thought, well, I'd like to continue this kind of work, but I, as a white male, feel very uncomfortable being the one leading the planning or envisioning around how Jack could function in that way. And it's at that time that I talked to the board, and we developed the model of a co-directorship at Jack. And I eventually spoke to De'Ara Wright, who was an organizer, a dance artist, And she had been a part of previous performances at Jack. And she eventually joined me as co-director of Jack. And we conceived of a series called Reparations 365, which was about reparations for Black Americans. And that was going to be a year-long series, but it attracted so much interest that we extended it. And it ended up being a 3-year series on reparations, where it just kept going from community conversations to performances. It was clear that this was something that our community felt like it needed. So that really kind of shifted Jack from being purely an experimental art space to being one that was really threaded into the surrounding community in a different way.
Okay. What did the work of building Jack teach you about leadership? What did it teach you about community? What did it teach you about your own artistry? And in terms of how you make, how you gather, how you lead? What did this teach you?
As an artist, I feel like I'll step back and say, as a person, I felt like Jack was an education. And mainly in that we had all these artists coming in, doing work, sharing their own truth, which was a different truth from mine. And it was my education. It was like school. It was like grad school. Just like seeing all these different perspectives and ways of approaching the world on our stage changed me as a person. And I think the development of the Forward Ferguson would never have happened had we not had all those artists if I hadn't been exposed personally to all those artists' truth that we had programmed in the first 4 years of running Jack, and moved me to create that. And so that I have great gratitude for that opportunity to be exposed to this, because I made it a goal to program not the season that I personally would want to see as an audience member necessarily, but one that I felt like was the most exciting for our neighborhood, for our community in general. And so I was maybe exposing myself to perspectives that I probably would not have seen had I just been choosing what to go to one night after another. In any case, that was a big thing. What I learned about community was that my effort to get that goal of having community members come to shows, the way that I did that was just infiltrated the community in a way. Like I joined the church choir I joined the choir of the church down the street. I joined the community board and the subcommittee on youth education and cultural affairs. I was visiting with business owners, meeting them. I would go to the senior center and hang out with seniors, and just start to get to know people and build relationships. And it was through that I was really ended up being really specific about what to invite this particular person to, and really curated that very carefully, and be okay with not everything being a good fit for everyone. So I was careful about that. The other thing that I learned is that our seniors were our relationship to them was so wonderful to me, because I was getting them to come to see still pretty adventurous productions, and they would just be so thrilled at just the invitation itself. And to have them here watching young artists work and being in relationship with the work of young artists was really truly something special. And I could see how it affected the young artists to have elders watching their audience that watching their show that they didn't necessarily have a relationship with, but they were so glad that was a part of what we did at Jack. And yeah, that was a big development for us.
That's nice. That is rich, Alec. Oh, let me ask this question. How did you come up with the name Jack? I mean, I know the answer, but they don't. How did you come up with the name Jack?
So it took a while to come up with a name. Mimi and I were just like, brainstorming. And I thought, whose spirit I want infused in this space is my grandfather, Jack Duffy, who was a Presbyterian minister, but also a great lover of the theater. He had memorized like soliloquies by Shakespeare. He had, Eugene O'Neill plays on his shelf. He wasn't an artist himself necessarily, but he had such an appreciation for the arts and for theater that I wanted that combination of his community service and his passion for the arts together in one space. And so that's why I named the space Jack.
What is your hope for the next generation of artistic leaders or theater companies in New York City? What do you hope that they take on?
Well, I mean, my hope is that they can find opportunities to be as bold as their inner self is. I would love for them to find a way and to be able to rest in their knowledge and their truth and find an outlet for that. Whether it's in their living room, whether it's in a theater, whether it's in a bar, a storefront, just find that space that they can express themselves, because there will be other people that will need to hear that so that they feel comforted if they're uncomfortable.
Right. And so my final question is, who are some artists that are making right now that you would love to shout out, or that excite you, or that you just want our listeners to be aware of?
There are I mean, I get excited by work by Tay Blow, who had one of his first productions was a Jack. He has a company called Royal Osiris Karaoke Ensemble. They make really unusual work. Peter Mills Weiss and Julia Mounsey, who kind of got their start at Jack as well several years ago, but make really discomforting work that I really appreciate. Niall Harris and Crackhead Barney, like these people, these are artists who are just like putting themselves out there in the world and like not letting anything stand in their way. And that boldness and bravery is really, it's unusual and an inspiration for me. Those are a few. Stacey Grossfield is a choreographer. She would curate dance here at Jack. She offered to, and so she curated dance for many seasons here at Jack, but she does her own work, which is so wild and so dark. It's like the dance equivalent, I think, of our work as a company, Hoi Polloi. Those are just a few of many, yeah.
Okay. Well, Alec, I have to say thank you so much for sharing your story, your vision, the roots of this place. Truly, your leadership, your passion, your love for people is at the foundation of Jack, how we move, what we do. And I'm so, so grateful that I'm able to sit in this position helping to support artists, community, and people who need to express who they are, the stories that they come from. It is an honor to be here. It is an honor to sit and be in community with you. And I am just grateful, 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 grateful that we get to do this.
Yes,
so,
yes,
thank you, Alec.
Agreed. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you all. I hope you all will come back and check us out some more. Come to the theater. We have shows. We have experiences. I promise you no one's going to jump on your lap, break your glasses with a pair of knives. But you will be surprised by what you see here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on JACKmix. There's more to come.
More voices, more stories, more light. If you felt something, don't just listen, come be a part of it. Step into our theater. Sit amongst the laughter, the silence, the sparks of inspiration. Find out what's next at jackny.org and follow us at JackArtsNY to stay close. Until next time, thank you for being in the mix.